Secretary, just a couple of questions for you. I have been speaking earlier today with ASIO and the AFP around some concerns with what happens when we allow people who have committed very dangerous crimes that put the community at significant risk, particularly terrorist offences and child sexual offences, back into the community. I was hoping you might be able to provide the committee with some commentary around the broader concerns that you might have about these two topics, and also the costs that are associated with monitoring these people when they are re-released into the community.
Well, Senator, if I may, or if I might, rather than providing you with commentary that may or may not be thought to reflect my sort of personal views about these things, in terms of the role I play as Secretary of the Department, our job is to administer the relevant legislation. Mm-hmm. There's some crossovers with the Attorney General's Department, but typically the control and post-custodial sentence restraint regimes fall to the Department of Home Affairs, and then of course when and if the Parliament chooses to modify laws or to introduce new powers, ASIO and the AFP and other agencies then apply those laws. We are looking very closely and carefully, as Mr Dutton has said publicly, in relation to post-custodial arrangements. There are, as a matter of record, there are a number of persons who are currently incarcerated who are put into jail for very serious offences in relation to preparing for and being willing to participate in terrorist acts. Ms Geddes and her staff, Ms Geddes may wish to join us, are looking at both the circumstances here in Australia, but also looking comparatively at other common law jurisdictions, including the United Kingdom, where this problem has also emerged. The government, I've got no doubt at all, given its stance on these matters, but also what the Prime Minister, the Minister and others have said over time, would, I think, receive advice from the Department very favourably as to whether laws might need to be amended. Obviously that would then be a matter for the government to consider and then put to the Parliament in the normal manner. But it is something that we've got under very active consideration. Ms Geddes, would you care to answer, to add to my answer?
I think you provided a very fulsome answer there, Secretary.
Well, thank you for the commentary, but are there any amplifying points that you think are worth drawing to the Senator's attention?
As the Secretary mentioned, there are a range of mechanisms for those that are in prison at the moment. Should they be released, the Minister can give consideration to control orders, and should an individual breach any of the conditions under those control orders, they could be found back in prison for up to 5 years. We've also got, since 2017, continuing detention orders for really high risk terrorist offenders, and that would see, should a judge have before him or her a consideration to keep that person in prison because of the risk that they pose to the community, that's also in place. So there's a range of mechanisms that can be used to manage high-risk terrorist offenders.
Mm-hmm. But more broadly than just the, I say just the community safety element, it is fundamentally the most important element that we make sure that members of our community are not at risk of these convicted criminals recommitting offences when they're released. I assume it would be a costly exercise to, in terms of monitoring them more broadly, but also the expense of reinvestigating these people, these convicted criminals when they reoffend.
I'm not sure that I'd use the term reinvestigation, Senator, in the sense that the matters for which they've been tried and convicted and sentenced have been dispensed with.
Of course, sorry, investigating them when they commit further offences. Just to be even perhaps more pointed in relation to the evidence I gave earlier, in light of both the cohort of sentenced persons, convicted persons who are currently in our system, and in light of concerns that we have formed in collaboration with our partners in the Federal Police and ASIO, particularly in relation to a number of attacks overseas, including one very
high-profile attack in London, we've certainly commissioned some work internally that I alluded to earlier through Ms Geddes, who's the relevant Deputy Secretary, and Dr Bopping. So you've been demoted back to a mere minister. Dr Bopping's heads our CT centre, is doing some work. As I alluded to earlier, we tend not to, unless the Senator wishes to press it, of course, go to the content of the advice, particularly advice that may or may not have yet been rendered to government. But I can confirm to this committee that work is underway. I won't go to the specifics because we obviously need to go to government first. Work is underway on whether there are gaps in legislative powers, whether that balance of cost versus the fundamental precept of liberty, that once you've been sentenced, you've done your time, you're out. How do you strike that balance? How do you ensure the paramount responsibility that the state has to protect citizens and residents, which is the highest duty of the state? So Dr Bopping and his team are doing some work in that area.
Thank you. And look, I certainly won't ask you to go into specifics because I completely understand the sanctity of that work that you're doing, but it reassures me to know that it's occurring. Thank you very much.
We are very actively seized of the matter, Senator, I can assure you.
Thank you.
Very active.